A very typical feature of video games are cheats, whose functions are to alter gameplay or make certain visual changes. In some ways, they are activated through menus where certain values are inserted. Other ways are by pressing specific buttons, or in already more complex cases, changing the game completely. And Plants vs Zombies is no exception. All these tricks are activated by certain typings that we will have to do on our keyboard. However, there is a trick that makes the whole game change in a very drastic way, and not in a good way either. Not only that, but another thing that differentiates this trick from others is that it cannot be activated anytime we want, but we will have to write it in a specific part of the game. Today, I'm going to tell you about a very strange experience I had with this game, which has to do with the supposed trick that I mentioned earlier, and I hope not to make the terrible mistake of activating it ever again. It was approximately 9 PM. I was on my laptop preparing to record my weekly Plants vs Zombies gameplay for my YouTube channel. I had activated my screen recorder before I opened the game to make sure that everything was in order and there was no incorrect configuration. Until then, everything was perfectly normal, but once the game had finished loading, I was surprised that I was asked to create a new profile. At first, I got quite angry. I thought I had lost my progress permanently and for no reason. However, I remembered that I wanted to back up my game, but apparently, instead of copying the file from my game, I simply moved it to another place. I wanted to close the game down, make the copy of my previous save file and restore everything, but the game did not let me out. I had to necessarily create a profile to be able to leave, so I typed anything, and it came out U53RDV, and this was the beginning of my mistake. When I clicked accept, the screen turned black and a warning appeared that said the following. Warning: a command has been written to activate the developer mode of this game. Continue anyway? When I read that, I got excited. I began to imagine all the possibilities I could have with developer mode, and without thinking twice, I clicked on it. Unexpectedly, the game closed. I assumed that this was due to the fact that it was necessary to restart the game in order to activate the developer mode. As I wanted to get back in, I was surprised to see that the name and the icon of the game changed a little. Anxiously, I opened the game to see what changes there were, but the changes were totally different from what I expected. The game became very strange, even somewhat diabolical. At least, that's how I saw it. Everything was distorted when I entered the menu. Everything just looked unpleasant. The username was not the one I put, but it was replaced by the word developer with an exclamation mark, which didn't make sense. Everything was just dark, quite unnerving to be a rather innocent game. I don't know what the hell this had to do with developer mode. Unfortunately, curiosity killed the cat that night. I started to look at the game options to see what changes they had. They had all changed in an unpleasant way. All of my game was complete. It was just as I had left before this, but this was not normal at all for these strange changes. I realized that the icon of the Zen Garden appeared in a dialogue balloon, which, instead of having the usual drop of water, it read, "Help." I clicked on it to see what it meant by that, but the game closed. I was afraid to open it again. I felt that something bad was happening, but I did not want to stay with the intrigue that other things have changed, and decided to open the game again. It was a big mistake indeed. This time, I decided to enter Crazy Dave's store. Luckily, I was able to enter without problems. However, Dave looked glitched. He had no body, only his head and arms floating in the air, and he said nothing. He just stared at me with one eye, smiling. I went back to the main menu to check the almanac, and let's just say that what I saw was pretty interesting, yet unsettling. The plants and zombies underwent changes too. In the parts of the plants, the changes were not so drastic. Some had their normal designs, others were crying, or had a sad expression like pea shooters or sunflowers. Some, such as the chomper of the spikeweed, had blood on them, and other plants like squash had white eyes. However, the zombies had a change in common, and that was that they all had empty eyes. black, hollow eyes, some even having blood on their faces. Finally, I entered adventure mode. When clicking, the zombie's hand appeared as always, but the call played at the beginning was extremely loud. It was a deafening noise that luckily did not last long. When I entered, the entire game had a red filter. I was curious to see what it felt like playing a level with these changes. I chose my plants and started the level. And at the beginning, the letters, instead of saying ready set plant, they said prepare to die. I got a little nervous, but I continued with the level. The first zombie appeared and I began to prepare my defenses. When I placed the pea shooter down and it attacked the zombie, the pea hit, and that's when it dripped a little bit of blood. However, there was something much more darker, and that is that when the zombies died, they left a puddle of blood in the place where they fell. From there, everything continued normally, nothing out of the ordinary, apart from the aforementioned changes. I even began to forget my fears as I was beginning to entertain myself. This made me trust myself to such an extent that I thought nothing bad would happen anymore. As I reached the end of the level, some questions still went through my head, such as, what was with the gloomy aspect? Why was there the word help in the Zen garden icon? What's with developer mode? I kept playing, and finally, I reached the last wave. I sat back and waited for the plants to eliminate the remaining zombies. At last, I completed the level, but when I clicked on the coin bag, the screen turned black and biting sounds began to play. The zombies had eaten all of my plants, and out of nowhere, I lost the level. Instead of leaving the usual message when you lose the level, bloodstains appeared all over the screen, and the screaming noise that played when you lose the game never ended. However, I realized that my laptop had been completely locked. I could not close it. Nothing. But for some reason, the recording was still on. I knew that sooner or later the blue screen of death would appear. I took out my cell phone and started recording my laptop. Finally, the blue screen of death appeared, even though I was already waiting for it. I felt afraid. I felt that something would appear on the screen at any time. And unfortunately, it did. The blue screen disappeared, and suddenly, an image of a deformed zombie jump-scared me, with a giant mouth and red eyes with a loud and frightening background sound. It just stared at me, grinning. Quickly, I tried to turn off the laptop forcibly, but it did not respond, even though I pressed the shutdown button and held it there. Nothing happened at all. The image multiplied and deformed more and more. I managed to get the image and text to disappear, but the sounds followed, getting louder and louder. The laptop still did not respond even if I kept pressing the power button. Tired, I slammed the screen down onto the keyboard with a strong blow. That managed to shut the laptop down. I flipped the laptop over to feel how hot it was, and it was hot, for obvious reasons. I didn't want to turn it back on. The next day, I went over to my laptop and touched it to see how it was. I couldn't believe it. It was still warm from yesterday's events, but it was at a temperature that I could stand being on. So, with some fear, I turned it on, hoping that none of the events of the previous night would have affected it. To my surprise, I started it without any problem. However, I uninstalled the game and decided to avoid it for at least a few weeks. Afterwards, I started checking my email to see if there was something interesting or anything at all. But what I saw made my heart drop. I received an email by a user named U53RDV, the same name that I used to activate developer mode in the game. When I clicked the message, it read, "You have discovered what this game was going to be. I was a developer of Plants vs. Zombies and I wanted the game to look more realistic, but they rejected my idea. And after a discussion, we reached the insults, and they ended up firing me. In an act of revenge, I hacked the computers where the game was developed to be able to anonymously modify one of the versions of this game. Congratulations! You were the first victim to find my version. Now as long as you have the game installed on your computer, your data will be sent to me. Do not bother trying to uninstall it. Once this email is marked as read, a virus will be downloaded that will force your computer to have the game permanently installed. Thanks for playing. Sincerely, U53RDV." Fortunately, I uninstalled the game before that alleged virus was downloaded when reading the email. This has been the worst experience I've had when playing Plants vs. Zombies. I just hope there's no one out there who will go through the same thing that I went through.